Today we're going to be going over one of our sample applications for checking in and checking out as it is to be used with our new TracerPlus PC. So first things first, I'll just show all of you how to get the application that we're actually going to be using because in this case it is going to be a sample, so we don't have to do much configuration. And if you guys want to just dive in and grab this and play with it for yourself, then you're more than welcome to do so. And just so everyone's aware, we will have a question and answer period at the end where you guys can submit your questions in text, and I'll pick them out and answer some of them if we have any time remaining at the end of this webinar. Okay, so first things first, I'll open up TracerPlus desktop here, and I'm going to come here and do our sample applications. And now I just have to grab our app. And here it is, the asset checkout, track when assets are not returned. And in case you didn't see, that was in our asset tracking category. So I'll come here and grab this. I'll start our import. And then when this is done, I'll just open it up in desktop. Okay, so here is our actual application. As you may notice, it is 3 sessions. We have 1 session for checking out assets, 1 session for checking in assets, and 1 session for maintaining a list of all of our assets. Now, as for the actual flow of this application, when you download it for the first time, it will not have any assets in it by default. So you're going to want to use this asset list session to sort of preload all of your assets into the device, from which point you can actually go ahead and perform all your checking in and checking out. But let's take a look at what that actually entails before we jump into the use of the application. So here in desktop, what I'm just going to do is take a look at first our field settings, which contains a list of all of our fields where this checking in and checking out and this listing process is sort of constructed. So as you can see here, we have a number of different fields. Some of these are going to correlate to fields that will appear on the actual form itself, as you can see here in the form designer, our asset ID, description, condition, all fields that we can see in the project itself. And down here we have a couple of fields that you might not see actually in the project, but perform a very important function. And these are going to be used with calculations, as you can see here. They're set to field type calculated as opposed to text. And the purpose they serve is to do a little bit of addition and looking up. So when we need to find something based on probably an asset ID, it'll return that information, then add it to the record itself. So while you won't necessarily be working with them directly, they do serve a relatively important function. Now, as you can see, we have a bunch of different fields here. Most of them are either just going to be drop downs or text, where you will enter some kind of information and then adjust the, in this case, checkout as you see fit. So for example, you add some kind of record in your asset list, and now that that has been added to your list of assets, you want to check it out. You enter in your ID, and if that asset is found, it will use a lookup to pull up the description and potentially any other information that you have assigned to that item. And then you will be able to select a location, a condition, and even a requesting person. From a drop-down, and you can probably type it in by default if you'd like, if you don't necessarily want to do a drop-down. And then you will be required to sign the item out, at which point the record will be populated into this grid, so you have sort of a transaction history of how that application has been used. And now that's just the checkout session. The check-in session functions basically exactly the same, just obviously in the opposite direction. And you'll notice they look very similar. And then for our asset list, this is one way that you can get assets onto the device itself, where you would just be, and I'll demo this for you in a second, where we can just scan an ID. In this case, it would be a barcode. We enter some kind of short description in this field, and then we can actually add the asset to record. So we can check it in, we can check it out. Alternatively, if you wanted to, instead of adding assets one by one, and I won't demo this now because it does take up a bit more time than I'd like, we could hypothetically connect this application to TracerPlus Connect and by extension a backend database where we could create a sync button on this form, and instead of adding the assets one by one, have a large list of assets synced over from our choice of backend database to the device. So instead of plugging them in one by one and hitting add asset, we can push a button, sync over a list of all of our assets, however many that may be, and then check them in and check them out that way. So if you wanted to do a bit more configuration, you could work with Connect. However, like I said, I won't be going over that in this demo, but it is a possibility. So our application has pretty much been gone over, and I'll reference this a little bit more as we do some of the actual checking in and checking out, but let's deploy this now. So as I mentioned, instead of using a mobile device to run this application, as some of you may be used to, I'm actually going to use one of our new applications called TracerPlus PC. And that's this here, where you can actually run the application instead of on a mobile device directly on your PC. So for example, if you just wanted to set up a PC at a static point and do all this checking in and checking out instead of having a mobile device that you carry around, then by all means, you can use this in place of a mobile device, and it'll serve many of the same purposes. And you should be able to use this for pretty much any functionality that you'd be looking for. So now what I want to do is take this application that I've downloaded from the sample website, and I want to move it over to my device. And in this case, I'd be using PC, like I said. So what I'll do is come down here to build and deploy, and I'll click that. And I'm going to do what we call a web deploy or a QR code deploy. And what that means is I'm going to come over here to the deploy server. I'm going to hit deploy. And what this is going to do is it's going to start the deploy server on my PC, and I will be able to access this deploy server with any device, typically by scanning this QR code here in TracerPlus. But in this case, I actually won't be doing that because I'll be using PC. So instead, now that this is waiting for us to download it, in PC, I can come over to this download project button. And here I would just enter this information, this 192.168.4.29, my IP address, and port 4409, which is the port for the deploy server. So after I have that information in, all I'm going to want to do is refresh this project list just to make sure it's as up to date as it can be. I'll make sure we're selecting the right project. In this case, it is going to be our asset checkout, which is this one, and then I'll just download it. It'll take a brief moment to download the project, and then you'll notice down here, it'll say project changes detected. I can go ahead and hit refresh, and it'll reload our project with the, it'll reload PC with our new project. So now if everything worked correctly, you could see my 3 sessions from TracerPlus desktop are now on the device, our checkout, our check-in, and our asset list. And let's see if they correspond to the actual sessions as I have created them in desktop. Okay, so here back in the form designer, we can see this is what we should be seeing. And this is what we are seeing. So everything looks to be okay. You'll just notice these field names are missing from the fields actually on the device. And that's just for design purposes. We don't necessarily want to be cluttering all this up, but everything looks like it came over correctly. I'm just going to check the rest of our sessions. And our asset list session, okay. Everything looks correct. So now I'm just going to go through the process of actually adding a record, maybe checking it in, checking it out, doing some edits to it. So for the purposes of this, obviously, because I'm on my PC and not an enterprise class mobile device, I don't have an integrated barcode scanner that I can use. In this case, I'm using just what we would call a dummy scanner. It's really just a handheld scanning device, as you might see at any supermarket or anything like that. And it plugs directly into my PC, where I can use it in much the same way as a barcode scanner. So I've got a couple of tags next to me. And now that I'm in my asset list session, all I'm going to do is scan the barcode, enter a bit of a description, and add these assets. First, I'm going to clear out anything that's in here already, which I probably should have done beforehand, just to make sure we're starting fresh. Okay, so let's add some assets. I'm going to scan that. Okay, here's my first barcode, asset ID 0001. And I'll add a quick description. I'll just say this is item 1. And if I hit add asset, all it will do is submit that as a new asset to my asset list. So if I wanted to check that in or out, it's sitting here waiting for me to do something with it. I'll do the same thing for the other 3 assets that I have. I've got item 2 and item 3. Okay, so I just added my 3 items to my imaginary asset list. So these are the 3 items that I want to be checking in and checking out. So now that I have those 3 items, let's say someone comes in and I want to check this item out to them. What's going to happen is they'll say, check me out item 1, which, if you'll remember, is barcode 0001. So I will rescan item 1, and you'll see after I scanned the barcode itself, a lookup is being performed by the checkout assets. And it's pulling up some of the information about the barcode that I had already entered. And since it does find it, it can retrieve that information. And it's just going to pull up the description, and I can enter in anything that I want. And eventually some of these will be added to the device itself. So just for the sake of demonstration, hypothetically, if I were to scan an item that was not in my description list, say, let's try this one. So if I scan this, remember I did not add an item with this asset ID or this barcode. So since that's not found in Lookup, it's telling me I can't find this tool. There's no information about it. Now, that's not to say that I can't add a description for this by going back to the asset list and scanning it in, but it's just saying that this has not been found at this point. So let's go back to asset 1 and we'll do the checkout. Okay. So here's our asset 1 again. It found its description. And now let's say I want to check this item out. So I'm going to proceed through the rest of the form and fill out some of this information. All these dropdowns are going to be pre-populated with information that I've designated to exist in these dropdowns. These can either be typed into, or you could have values selected from the dropdown, or if you'd like, you can just have only the dropdown values and not allow typing into them, just to prevent maybe user error. But in this case, I've got my item 1 and I'm going to select, let's say it's in good condition. And there's, okay, say it's in location 1. And we'll say it's being checked out to, sure. And then it'll just require us to do a quick signature. And then this record will automatically submit. So now that I've checked it out, here it is in our inventory, item 1. The condition was good, and it was checked out at this location 1. Now, if you wanted any of these dropdowns to contain different information, that's easy enough. We would just come over to all our fields that are these dropdowns, like the condition, the location, and the requester. And all of this dropdown information is just stored in here. So if you would like that to be either not a dropdown or a dropdown that contains different information, that's easily changed. So no need to worry about that. Okay, so my item's been checked out. Let's come back and check it back in. So this is going to function in a very similar fashion to the check-in. In this case, all I'm going to do is scan it again. It'll pull up our description, and now that we're doing our check-in, maybe it's been damaged beyond repair since it's been checked out. So we'll say, let's replace that. Comments, I don't know, screens broken. And we could say that same person checked it in, and we'll go ahead, do our signature, and now we can see that this item has been checked back in, but it's in a slightly worse condition than when we checked it out. So from our check-in and check-out, we can see that we've got a record of these items' most previous location, and we can do any manner of checking in or checking out that we wish. And we can proceed through here as you normally would, checking in and checking out. There is not necessarily much to this application, so it should be relatively easy for anyone to pick up and use if they have any interest in driving this. Now, if you wanted to do a check-in and check-out application yourself, it would not necessarily be difficult to configure this. I would certainly suggest, if you weren't going to use an application that we've created, that you at least use one of our applications as a guideline. Because the checking in and checking out is not necessarily difficult to configure, but the lookups and calculated fields that are involved are above the heads of some people, at least on first use. They're somewhat complicated, but it shouldn't be too much work if you wanted to do something like this. This application is relatively basic. It's not super basic just because of the inclusion of lookups and calculated fields, but if you wanted to grab this right off our website and use it as is, you should really have no issue, as there isn't much configuration or any configuration necessarily that you have to do in order to get it to function for you. Now, as I mentioned earlier, and because we do have a bit of time, I'll talk about maybe what you want to do with this information after you've collected it. So we can talk about the syncing process just a little bit, and I'll hit on the importation of records to the device. So hypothetically, like I said, if we didn't want to add any assets to the application individually, as we would in this asset list, we could do something like creating a new button on this form or anywhere in the project, really, that will sync records over from any backend database of your choosing using Connect to the device. So I won't do the full configuration now, but what you'd really want to do is create a new button. We'll call this something like sync. And then we're going to want to designate its button action, or as is obvious, the action that occurs when you press the button to do sync. And then at risk of diving too deeply into Connect, we're going to want to designate this host ID, which is the PC that Connect is running on that we want to sync to, and the profile ID of Connect within that profile that's running on that given PC. So just for sample purposes, we'll say it's running on host ID 1, which is probably not designated in here, and then profile ID 1 of that host. So when I say that I want to sync to host ID 1, I come over here to the project settings and then to the Connect tab, I will be allowed to designate a host that I want to sync to and or from. And this is where we tell the device what PC to look for an instance of Connect on. So for example, if I was just running Connect on my PC and I wanted to sync to my PC, I'd enter my IP address in here. And we'll just leave it on port 4409 because that is the default for syncing to the actual Connect application itself. So we'll say we're running on port 4403. and we're going to sync to my PC. So hypothetically, if I wanted to do any of that kind of configuration in Connect, I'd create a new project, and don't worry about too much here. I'm just going to move kind of quick. And I'll say I want to sync from, say, our sample ODBC data source to Connect. So I'll come down here in the source to my TracerPlus Connect sample, which we include with TracerPlus Connect. And then I want to go to TracerPlus. So if I want to sync over records from some data source to my device, I'm just going to have to set up Connect to sync all these fields over. Okay. And then hypothetically, this is really all you could have to do. I'm going to set this to session 3 because that's my asset list. And then if I were to have configured this correctly, I could push this sync button and it would send over a list of all of these items to Connect or to my device, in this case, TracerPlus PC. And instead of us having to add these one by one, we could do it with Connect in one big batch. Okay, so there isn't necessarily much more to go over. Most of this configuration is relatively straightforward if you want to take a look at it, but a lot of it is just entering fields with information that you wanted to gather. So into these text fields, into these drop downs, and keeping the record of these items. And then when you're actually using it on the device, you have a list of maybe where the item was last seen. So for example, after all this checking in and checking out has been done, back in the asset list, we can see the place that this item is currently located. So from what you can see, remember we did our check in or our check out first and then a check in on item 1. So you can see here's our asset ID of 1 and its description. And if you'll remember, the last thing we did was check it in. So here's our updated information about item 1, which is it was maybe damaged beyond repair and we want to replace it, but it is checked in, so it's available, its last location, and the last time that transaction was recorded, as well as the last person who interacted with that item, in this case, checking it in. Now, hypothetically, if we wanted to check that item back out, just so you could see that this information is going to change, I'll check these 2 items out real quick. So let's check item 1 back out. I'll rescan it. I'll select the condition, say maybe we fixed it, it's back to good condition. And I'll check it out to the same location and to the same person. So we'll sign again. And we'll see that we did another transaction with this item and it was rechecked out. And I want to do the same thing to item 2. Scan that. Do exactly the same checkout. And we can see that that item as well was checked out. So now when we come back to our asset list session, into the View Data tab where we can see all the information about items that are checked in or checked out, we can see that the last 2 items that we just checked out have been changed. As you can see, they were previously available in the status, but now they're checked out. And our last transaction date, obviously we did it on the same day, so this is still going to say 5/15, but hypothetically, if we wanted this to be as accurate as to hours or minutes, then this would have changed. The condition is good. If you remember, we previously had it set to replace. And with something like this, we can sync this over to using TracerPlus Connect to a backend database and sort of keep track of where all of our items are, who has them, the condition they're in, the last person who maybe handled them, and the last date that they were handled at. Also, if you were not planning on using TracerPlus Connect, they could always just be exported directly from the device as a text file. So that's always an option. Okay, so I think that's about all I wanted to go over today. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them. And if I don't see any questions in the next few minutes, we can just go ahead and wrap up. Okay, so we are coming up on time here. Thanks everybody for joining us today. I hope this was informative. If you have any questions, like I said, be sure to reach out to your account manager directly or sales@tracerplus.com. Or if you end up actually downloading this application and you have any questions about how to use it, you can always reach out to us at support.tracerplus.com or open up a ticket on our website. Okay. Thanks for joining us. I hope you guys learned a lot. Bye.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoy our content, be sure to like and subscribe, and visit our channel below for more. You can also find us online at TracerPlus.com or on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. If you have any questions, feel free to call or email us at any time, and we'll be happy to help.